Hey y'all, Dr. Jeannie here. So a couple weeks ago, I shared a video about therapy versus coaching and just sharing my perspective as a psychiatrist and coach. And it was really based on a conversation that I had with a woman physician at a conference that I was at recently, who came up and just asked me something along those lines. And let me just share the question with you. She was essentially saying that for many years she had been in therapy, on medications, really doing the work to take care of her mental health. I was in a place, right, where, she's stable. She's certainly not in any crisis. She was, at this physician conference. I felt like after all of these years of her work on her mental health, that she was still kind of stuck in place. She wasn't moving forward in the way that she wanted to. She's an entrepreneur, she's a private practice owner, she's a mom, she's a wife, and really what she wants is to flourish and thrive in all of those areas of her life and really create a life that feels good and looks good for her. And while I made my first video about therapy versus coaching, because that was a part of the question, I think the deeper question that I want to address today, something that I've seen and noticed for a really long time as a psychiatrist, and that used to frustrate me, like in clinical practice, was the fact that our medical model, right, including our mental health model, is just based around this idea that the goal is to reduce a person's symptoms, right? That's kind of the goal of care. That's the case in many, probably all fields of medicine, certainly the case in psychiatry, that the goal oftentimes, at least the way that I was trained, is to work with someone who is suffering with a health condition and intervene in such a way and treat in such a way that symptoms are reduced. And if symptoms are reduced or put into remission, then treatment's been successful, and we can send them on their way. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what this woman physician was asking me is like, okay, but what else, right? Like, is there something more? Is there something beyond, right? Symptom reduction, whether it's for like a diagnosed mental health condition, or if it's for, where I spend a lot of my time now, which is in burnout. I've been looking at the studies, there's a pretty robust body of studies around burnout in physicians. Lots of good information, lots of strides have been made. And right, like when you look at those studies, what we're seeing is that the marker of success is that signs and symptoms of burnout in those studied are reduced, right? And sometimes very significantly. We know that coaching is an evidence-based intervention for burnout, which is incredible. And there's been some even more recent studies that show that there are some positive markers too, right? Like there are things that are not only is burnout reducing, but things like self-compassion and fulfillment and stuff also can be impacted positively and be increasing, which is really incredible too. As I looked at this and as I kind of mulled over my colleague's question, this reminds me of how I got into this space as a psychiatrist who is now full-time in my coaching practice. That same question, isn't there something more, right, that we can aim towards for people, for human beings, than just a reduction in symptom burden? I remember finding, right, that research that kind of supported what I was thinking, which is in the positive psychology space, Corey Keyes, Martin Seligman, folks like that, starting to talk about the fact that unlike how I was trained as a psychiatrist, this idea that mental health is very binary or black and white, and either you have the symptoms of a mental health condition or you don't, either you're sick or you're fine. Mental health really is not binary and actually can exist on a continuum, and actually it exists on two continuum, right? Where health is really more than just the absence of symptoms, mental health symptoms or negative symptoms, but also the presence of positive symptoms of mental health and well-being, right? And when you have both, then you have like really exceptional mental health and well-being. And what I was hearing from my colleague at that conference and what I've seen, I've experienced myself is that that's really what the goal should be, right? Like there's some people, right? And it's probably you, if you're watching this, who wants to do better, right? Than just reduce your symptoms, which is a great starting place, but also like you want to flourish, right? You want to thrive, that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. And so the question is like, how do we do that? And I'm in the coaching space. I work a lot with women physicians who are suffering with burnout, and there are many, right, coaching programs. And again, lots of studies that show the efficacy in terms of reducing burnout for physicians, right, through various coaching interventions, which I think is amazing. But like, is there something more, right? Like, should we be aiming even further? Because like my colleague and like myself and like so many ambitious growth-minded women physicians, right? There's something more that we desire. Feeling a bit better, having less burnout is awesome, but like, how do we flourish and thrive? Are the systems, is there a path for doing that reliably? Are the programs and systems that we have in place actually meeting that need, right? Are we stopping, just like the medical model often does, at reduction in symptoms? Are we stopping and saying that, okay, well, that's good enough? And my answer to that is no, it shouldn't be. There's some studies that have named this gap, explicitly, sharing that we are lacking, right? There's lots of good research, but there's some gaps there. One is, there aren't any documented like step-by-step paths towards moving a physician or woman physician especially from burnout to where she's actually flourishing and thriving. And keep in mind that flourishing, like I mentioned before, is something that's defined like in the literature. Ray Keys, Martin Seligman, like gives these specific markers that we could and should be aiming for, but again, hasn't really been explicitly named as the endpoint, the goal for physician coaching programs. And I think that's an opportunity for growth. I focused my practice exclusively on working with women physicians for the past 6 years. I've been a psychiatrist for 16, but past 6 years focused exclusively on coaching women physicians inside my coaching practice, Sanctuary. And when I think about the stories, the transformation, when I think about definitions of flourishing, and I'll talk about more about that in another video, but the markers of flourishing blows me away like that this is what my clients are experiencing, and something that I want more women physicians to experience, right? Some of the markers, for example, like some of Seligman's work, right, talks about like positive emotion and meaningful relationships and personal growth. This is something that Corey Keyes talks about, and all of these things. And I have so many like of these credible examples of women physicians who are, at least inside Sanctuary, moving so much further than just the reduction of their burnout into places where they're truly flourishing and thriving.